Listen closely. Have you ever witnessed a miracle that arrives wrapped in the most unexpected form? Still, within a quiet pasture on the outskirts of Kentucky Horse Park, a bond was forged, one that would kindle hope in even the darkest corners of the human soul. Prepare to embark on a journey brimming with tenderness, mystery, and awe, for no one could have anticipated what happened next. Gareth Langford had always been restless. In his younger days, he drifted from one dusty highway to another, chasing vanishing clouds of possibility. He was the kind of man who kept a small backpack in the trunk of his car at all times, prepared to leave any situation at the first tremor of disappointment. Perhaps it was fear of failure, or perhaps it was a longing for greener fields, but some unspoken ache inside him remained unanswered until tragedy pulled him back home. When Gareth's older brother, Alan, died unexpectedly, Gareth returned to rural Kentucky for the funeral. The roads he'd once traveled in his teenage years felt strangely unfamiliar, like a half-forgotten dream. Memories flooded back. Summer days at the old wooden barn, the smell of fresh hay after rainfall, and the adrenaline of horseback rides at dawn. But overshadowing all these sweet recollections was the guilt of having left his brother's side so many years ago. At the funeral, the hush was broken only by the gentle murmuring of condolences. Gareth found himself stiff and silent, unsure how to act among family members who had not seen him in nearly a decade. Then the reading of the will changed everything. It turned out his brother had left him something wholly unexpected, a small, run-down piece of land with a battered stable, located close to the expansive grounds of Kentucky Horse Park. Among horse enthusiasts, that region is legendary. It hosts major events like the Land Rover Kentucky 3-day event and houses the International Museum of the Horse. Alan's will bequeathed to Gareth not just land, but a lingering responsibility to care for a single horse that still resided on the property. Everyone else seemed baffled by why Alan left the old stable to the brother who had run off. But Gareth had no immediate way to turn down such a legacy. Money was tight, regrets were plenty. Confusion and sorrow mingled inside him. With a heavy heart, Gareth consented to take care of the property and all that came with it, promising, if only inwardly, that he would see it through for Alan's sake. Alan had rescued him as a colt, it turned out, after a tragic accident had cost Solomon his sight in both eyes. Though the details were hazy, Alan was never one to talk about heartbreak. Gareth had learned that Alan worked with local vets and horse experts to ensure Solomon recovered. Over the years, Solomon had adapted, relying on his hearing, sense of smell, and a powerful intuition to move around. Their first introduction was tentative. Gareth stepped into the stable, illuminated by a single crack of morning light. Dust motes swirled in the air. He spotted a tall, dark bay horse with milky white eyes. Solomon stood with his head turned slightly to the side, as if aware of Gareth's presence, but unsure of his intentions. In the hush of that moment, Gareth couldn't help feeling that the horse was quietly judging him, wondering who this stranger was and why he had arrived. After a long stillness, Gareth dared to approach. He whispered a greeting, one born of awkwardness and hope. At first, Solomon snorted and shuffled his hooves, picking up Gareth's uncertain energy. But then, as if remembering some deep well of gentleness left behind by Alan, Solomon gently nudged Gareth's outstretched hand. That quiet contact carried more weight than any word of consolation he had received at the funeral. For a fleeting second, Gareth felt the smallest bloom of warmth, an unspoken bond that would become the cornerstone of everything that followed. Those first weeks were tough. Gareth had no idea how to manage a blind horse, let alone maintain a dilapidated stable. He was armed with only a few notes from Alan's lawyer, a handful of phone numbers for local farriers, and vague instructions about feed. Every morning, Gareth would wake before sunrise and trudge through the dew to feed Solomon. The two would share a quiet moment, Gareth murmuring uncertain encouragement as he brushed Solomon's coat, trying to recall everything he once knew about equine care. Days became a blur of small errands and newly discovered tasks, patching holes in the stable walls, replacing rotted fence posts, hauling water from the well whenever the pump was temperamental. Gareth's bank account continued to shrink. He was plagued by a creeping sense that he might have made a mistake by accepting this inheritance. Still, there were moments when he caught glimpses of Alan's devotion to Solomon, like finding a stash of specialized feed carefully labeled in the corner of the barn. On the feed sacks, Alan had scrawled the horse's feeding schedule in large, neat letters, as though anticipating Gareth's arrival. That subtle foresight made Gareth's heart ache. He realized that in some unspoken way, Alan had prepared for him to take care of Solomon if the worst happened. And so, Gareth pushed on, fueled by guilt and a strange kinship with the creature who relied on him. Some days, he resented Solomon's needs. Other days, he felt proud when he saw the horse's coat shine under his newfound care. On still others, he questioned whether staying in this tired Kentucky homestead was the right path. Yet each time Gareth wondered about leaving, Solomon would sense his turmoil, nudge him gently, and the man would remain, as though tethered by a thread of unbreakable responsibility. One evening, Gareth stood on the sagging porch of the farmhouse, staring into the violet dusk. Crickets droned in the fields, and Solomon stood in his paddock, head lifted toward the sound. Gareth felt alone in a way that cut right through his chest. He was haunted by questions. Why had Alan bothered to rescue a blind horse? What had drawn him to this place, a short distance from Kentucky Horse Park, where so many riding enthusiasts came to chase their dreams? Gareth rummaged through the attic in search of clues. Amidst the cobwebs and old cardboard boxes, he discovered a trunk filled with family memorabilia photos, journals, bits and pieces of Alan's life. At first, Gareth skimmed the dusty pages without expectation, but then he stumbled on something that made his breath catch, a notebook detailing a special therapy program Alan had been developing. It seemed Alan had been working alongside a local equine therapy center to help individuals with physical and emotional challenges. The horse at the heart of the program was none other than Solomon. Alan's scribbled notes mentioned the mesmerizing calmness people experienced when near Solomon. Despite the horse's blindness, or perhaps because of it, he radiated a kind of empathy that soothed anxiety and lifted despair. People who suffered from post-traumatic stress, chronic illness, and the tribulations of everyday life found solace in simply grooming or walking beside Solomon. Gareth's heart twisted. He had never known this generous, purposeful side of his brother. So often, their communication had been overshadowed by their parents' divorce, arguments about finances, and Gareth's restlessness. Now he saw that Alan had spent his life quietly trying to ease the suffering of others. An odd warmth spread through Gareth's chest. Maybe, just maybe, there was a part of him that could carry on that legacy. With new determination, Gareth decided to deepen his bond with Solomon. Instead of simply feeding him and cleaning his stall, Gareth would lead him on walks around the property. At first, it was awkward. Solomon was easily startled if Gareth moved too quickly or came too close without warning. But the horse was undeniably curious. When Gareth patiently guided him along the fence line, Solomon would flick his ears and carefully step forward, trusting Gareth's gentle tugs on the lead rope. Afternoons found the pair venturing farther, pausing to let Solomon graze in soft patches of grass. Gareth would speak quietly, sharing bits and pieces of his past, as if confessing to an old friend. He told Solomon about the drifting years, the guilt he felt for missing Alan's final days, the fear that he would never find a place in the world. Solomon listened in the way only horses can, ears perking, hooves shifting, as if absorbing the emotions behind Gareth's words. One day, Gareth moved a few feet away and called Solomon's name. The horse lifted his head, ears swiveling, trying to locate the sound. Ever so carefully, he began to walk toward Gareth's voice, inch by inch. By the time Solomon reached him, Gareth felt his eyes sting with tears. In that small act, Solomon showed an astonishing willingness to rely on Gareth, to follow the gentle pull of trust. In return, Gareth found himself needing Solomon just as much, if not more. As Gareth's days settled into this new rhythm, he decided to take Solomon for a careful ride around a secluded pasture. Many horse owners would have balked at the notion leading a blind horse under saddle is risky without specialized training. Yet Gareth felt a magnetic draw to see if their growing bond could be tested under the open sky. He had read about how some blind horses could still enjoy brief rides if guided cautiously. He led Solomon into the wide meadow behind the barn, the ground soft with summer grass. Carefully, Gareth placed a lightweight saddle on Solomon's back, making sure everything was secure. Then he eased himself onto the saddle, heart hammering in his chest. At first, Solomon stood stiff, ears twitching in uncertain arcs. Gareth whispered reassurance, letting the horse feel his weight, his calm breathing. Slowly, Gareth used gentle pressure to cue a step forward. Solomon hesitated, lifted his muzzle to the wind, then took a cautious step. Another step followed. Before long, they were walking a wide circle around the meadow. The sensation overwhelmed Gareth, fear, gratitude, and wonder all rolled into one. Here was a horse, with no sight, boldly trusting Gareth to lead him through open terrain. Just as they rounded a corner of the meadow, Gareth caught sight of someone standing near the fence. A woman waved tentatively, her brow creased with concern. Gareth slowed Solomon to a halt and dismounted. As he led the horse toward the fence, he noticed the woman's jacket bore the logo of a nearby veterinary clinic. Her name, embroidered on the pocket, read Dr. Marianne Hensley. "We haven't met," she called softly. "I'm the veterinarian who used to help your brother with Solomon." Gareth nodded, introducing himself. Marianne brushed a strand of hair from her face and peered at Solomon with a mix of fondness and caution. "He seems comfortable with you," she observed, her voice tinged with relief. Alan was worried about who would take care of him if anything happened. Gareth's mouth went dry. "I'm trying my best." Marianne offered a small smile. "I'm glad to see that. Solomon's special. If you need any help, or if you ever want to understand more about Alan's plans for him, give me a call." She handed Gareth a small business card. He thanked her, feeling something inside him shift. Until that moment, he'd carried the burden alone, unsure if anyone even knew or cared about Solomon's well-being besides him. Now he realized a network of compassionate people existed, some of whom had known Alan far better than Gareth. Perhaps their knowledge could guide him and Solomon toward a destiny he could hardly imagine. In the following days, Gareth met with Dr. Marianne Hensley multiple times. She revealed that Alan had been working with the local equine therapy center, Hope Rise Stables, to organize sessions where individuals with physical or emotional trauma could interact with gentle horses, including the extraordinary blind Solomon. The therapy had proven successful. Participants reported reduced stress, improved self-confidence, and a renewed sense of connection. Some even claimed that meeting a horse who navigated the world without sight helped them trust their own instincts more deeply. Gareth was both humbled and intrigued. "So, Alan was building this whole program?" he asked, sifting through the notes Marianne provided. They showed scheduled group sessions, motivational talks, and personal testimonies from people who had visited. It seemed the program had paused abruptly when Alan passed away, but there was no reason it couldn't be revived. At first, Gareth hesitated. He was no therapist. He hardly knew how to keep the stable afloat, and the memory of how much Alan had believed in it stung. Still, the notion of continuing what his brother started tugged at him. For Gareth, it felt like a chance at redemption. Maybe he could do one decent thing in a life overshadowed by restlessness. Late one night, Gareth stood in Solomon's stall, resting a hand on the horse's sturdy neck. Solomon breathed quietly, eyes closed as always, but ears alert. Gareth spoke into the darkness, not sure who he was truly addressing: Solomon, Alan's spirit, or his own battered soul. "If there's a purpose for me, if this is it, show me how," he murmured. At that, Solomon snorted softly, shaking his mane as though responding to an unspoken calling. With Marianne's help, Gareth scheduled a small gathering at the stable. A handful of community members came, some with chronic pain, others with emotional struggles. Among them was a local high school teacher who had lost her son in an accident, and a middle-aged father grappling with depression. The mood was tentative, like a group of strangers waiting to see whether hope was truly within reach. Gareth introduced himself awkwardly. He explained how Solomon had overcome his blindness, how he navigated the world through sound, smell, and trust. Then Marianne guided them through gentle breathing exercises, encouraging participants to approach Solomon if they felt comfortable. One by one, they reached out to stroke Solomon's flank or muzzle. The horse remained calm, his presence radiating a quiet strength. Even those who had never been around horses seemed to sense his gentle spirit. Many of them began opening up, hesitant at first, then freely sharing their burdens. As Gareth listened, he noticed that whenever someone spoke with genuine vulnerability, Solomon would shift slightly closer, as though offering silent companionship. At the end of the session, tears mixed with smiles. The teacher who had lost her son pressed a trembling hand to Solomon's side, whispering, "He doesn't judge. He just stands here with me." A simple observation, but it contained a profound truth about empathy. Sometimes just being there, fully present, is enough to bring comfort to a hurting soul. As weeks passed, Gareth and Solomon conducted more sessions. Word spread quietly through the small towns near Kentucky Horse Park. More people reached out, curious about the healing power of a blind horse. Gareth found a renewed sense of purpose guiding these informal gatherings. The old stable was spruced up with fresh paint, better lighting, and a few bales of hay arranged for seating. Alan's once abandoned vision bloomed again, thriving under Gareth's earnest devotion. Part of Gareth's personal healing came from seeing how others benefited. A teenager with anxiety began volunteering, helping groom Solomon and feed him. She later confessed that being around Solomon gave her a sense of confidence she had never known. A war veteran, stooped from injuries both physical and psychological, found solace in the horse's calm acceptance, learning to walk steadily at Solomon's pace around the paddock. Still, Gareth wrestled with a constant undercurrent of longing. He had no illusions about being a mental health professional. He was merely continuing what his brother started, hoping to add his own authenticity. Yet each time he saw a spark of hope ignited in someone else, he felt that maybe he was healing, too gradually forgiving himself for the years he'd spent running away from relationships, responsibilities, and even his own sense of self. Hope Rise Stables, the equine therapy center that had initially consulted with Alan, approached Gareth about formalizing a partnership. He was stunned. Their proposal included providing resources such as certified therapy counselors, specialized equipment, and marketing to bring in individuals who might benefit from equine-assisted therapy. While Gareth's setup was simple, just a small barn, a single horse, and the farmland around it, Hope Rise Stables believed that Solomon's unique story could become a beacon of inspiration. Wary but intrigued, Gareth agreed to a meeting. He drove with Marianne over to Hope Rise's main facility, where well-groomed horses roamed in wide paddocks and therapy rooms overlooked rolling fields. The director, a patient-looking woman named Angela, listened as Gareth explained the steps he'd taken, his uncertainty and his desire to honor Alan's dream. Angela nodded thoughtfully. "We've seen how animals, especially horses, can transform lives," she said. "But a blind horse? That's remarkable. It shows people that challenges can be overcome, and that even with a disability, there's a capacity for profound connection." Her words resonated deeply with Gareth. He suddenly realized that maybe the entire reason he'd inherited Solomon was not just about personal guilt or family obligations. Perhaps it was about giving Solomon a chance to share his story of resilience with the world and, in doing so, help Gareth and others find meaning in adversity. The partnership wasn't without challenges. Paperwork, insurance issues, and facility requirements loomed. People from outside the small-town community questioned the safety of involving a blind horse in therapy sessions. Gareth found himself in meetings he never thought he'd attend, discussing liability forms, stable modifications, and accessible walkways. The old barn, which had once only needed a roof patch, now required significant upgrades: ramps, special gating, and signage for visitors. Then there was funding. Gareth had used up most of the money Alan left behind, just maintaining the stable and his personal expenses. Hope Rise Stables offered a partial grant, but it still fell short of covering everything. Faced with mounting bills, Gareth felt the all-too-familiar urge to run. He considered selling the land to a real estate developer, using that money to pay off debts, and simply walking away. But the thought of leaving Solomon and all those people who found solace in his presence brought Gareth to tears. Late one night, he sat on a bale of hay, staring at the moonlight filtering through the stable window. Solomon rested quietly beside him, occasionally flicking an ear at the sound of Gareth's ragged breath. "We've come too far for me to give up now," Gareth whispered, burying his face in his hands. In the stillness, he felt Solomon's muzzle brush against his shoulder, gentle and insistent. It was as though Solomon was reminding him that hardships could be navigated just like darkness, step by step, guided by faith and the subtle cues of compassion. Just when Gareth thought he might have to make an impossible choice, an unexpected phone call arrived. A local news station had caught wind of the therapy sessions involving a blind horse. They wanted to run a feature segment on the program, potentially shining a light on how animals, especially those with special needs, could change lives. Gareth hesitated. He was still grappling with his own doubts, and the idea of being on camera made his stomach churn. But Marianne encouraged him to do it, reminding him of Alan's dream. "This could bring in the help we need," she said gently, "and it might inspire others." So Gareth agreed. A small camera crew arrived one sunny morning, the reporter keen to film Solomon in his environment. The resulting footage was magical. The camera lingered on Solomon's milky eyes as he walked confidently beside Gareth, his ears flicking to pick up the faintest of sounds. The reporter interviewed Gareth, who spoke haltingly at first, but soon found his voice, explaining the therapy sessions and how Solomon's story represented the resilience that lay dormant in every human heart. The news segment aired that evening, and within days, Gareth's phone began to ring off the hook. Some calls were from local donors, touched by the story and eager to contribute. Others were from individuals or organizations seeking to collaborate, including private foundations devoted to helping people with disabilities. A few calls came from families who wanted to arrange therapy sessions or personal visits, believing that if a blind horse could survive and thrive, then perhaps their loved ones could find hope, too. One afternoon, as Gareth was going through newly arrived mail, he discovered an envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter that started with an apology. "I never had the courage to contact Alan while he was alive. But after seeing you and Solomon on the news, I realized I owe you both an explanation." Confused, Gareth read on. The letter was signed by someone named Jerry, claiming to be a long-time ranch hand who had worked for the stable that originally bred Solomon. Jerry explained that Solomon's blindness had not been a random tragedy, it had been caused by reckless management. A harsh chemical used in cleaning the barns had dripped into the stalls. Solomon, then a young foal, was the unfortunate victim. By the time the error was discovered, permanent damage had been done. The stable managers had tried to cover it up, planning to have Solomon euthanized to avoid legal consequences. That's when Alan had stepped in. Hearing rumors of the foal's condition, he drove hours to confront the stable's owners and rescue Solomon. Jerry wrote that Alan had threatened to expose everything unless they handed Solomon over. Fearful of the fallout, they signed the horse's ownership away. Alan, for reasons unknown, never publicly reported the stable's wrongdoing. Instead, he used every resource he had to nurse Solomon back to health. Gareth's hands trembled as he finished the letter. This was the deeper secret behind Solomon's blindness, one that Alan had kept hidden all these years. Gareth gazed at Solomon, grazing contentedly in the paddock. A surge of anger and sorrow washed over him, but also gratitude. His brother had saved this horse from a grim fate. And because Alan refused to let a tragedy define Solomon's life, Solomon was now helping others heal. It was a testament to compassion and sacrifice, a lesson Gareth felt in the marrow of his bones. Shaken by Jerry's confession, Gareth wrestled with whether to take legal action. The stable in question still operated, though under different management. Marianne cautioned him to consider the consequences carefully. "It's been years," she said gently. "Solomon doesn't need revenge. He has a full life now, and so do you." Yet Gareth felt compelled to at least acknowledge the wrongdoing. Spurred on by the same sense of justice that Alan must have felt, Gareth arranged a quiet meeting with the stable's current owner. He travelled there with Marianne by his side. The stable, ironically located near the scenic farmland, not far from the thoroughfare that leads to Kentucky Horse Park, was modern and well-maintained. The new owner, a middle-aged woman named Leslie, listened with shock and remorse when Gareth read aloud portions of Jerry's letter. "I'm horrified this happened here," Leslie admitted, her voice tight with emotion. "But I inherited this business a few years ago. We've changed everything about how we operate. The old owners are gone, and so are the staff who might have been responsible." Gareth could see the sincerity in her eyes. Part of him wanted to lash out, to do what Alan never did, bring the past to light. But something about the guilt etched on Leslie's face reminded him that punishing the new owners wouldn't undo Solomon's injury. After a moment of heavy silence, he gently folded the letter. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, "but I needed the truth to be known. If it helps change the way these animals are treated, then Alan's efforts meant something." Leslie nodded, tearful. She insisted on making a donation to Gareth's therapy program, apologizing for the harm that had come from a place she now managed. Although no sum of money could reverse what had happened, Gareth accepted, pledging it toward better infrastructure for Solomon's therapy sessions. As they parted ways, he felt a sense of closure. Alan's rescue mission would no longer be a hidden story. With the newly arrived funds and a blooming partnership with Hope Rise Stables, Gareth poured himself into building a safer, more welcoming environment for visitors. The stable's interior was renovated, fences were replaced, and a small covered arena allowed sessions to continue even in poor weather. People traveled from neighboring states to experience the mysterious calm that seemed to radiate from Solomon. Journalists wrote follow-up articles, highlighting how a horse once left for dead had become a symbol of healing. Over time, Gareth realized he was no longer just a caretaker for Solomon. He was part of a community dedicated to bringing hope where it was needed most. Evan's parents watched nervously from the sidelines. Evan inched toward Solomon, guided by Gareth's voice. The boy's small hand reached out, trembling slightly, until he made contact with Solomon's sleek, warm neck. A soft gasp escaped Evan's lips. "This horse doesn't see either," he breathed, his voice wavering between fear and wonder. Gareth nodded, placing a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. Carefully, Gareth showed Evan how to brush Solomon's side, speaking in calm tones about every movement. By the end of the session, Evan was giggling, pressing his cheek against Solomon's flank. When his parents came to lead him away, Evan spoke words that struck Gareth to the core. "If Solomon can do it, maybe I can do it too." Gareth's life began to revolve around the stable and the individuals who sought solace within its walls. His bank statements still showed precarious balances, but for once in his life, he felt as though he was exactly where he was meant to be. The old restless urge to flee had vanished, replaced by a determination to see Alan's dream become a lasting reality. Yet there was more to be discovered. One afternoon, Gareth decided to explore the far corner of the property, a section he had rarely visited. Overgrown weeds stretched out, concealing what appeared to be a narrow path. Leading Solomon carefully on a lead rope, Gareth navigated through the tall grass. Every so often, Solomon would pause, turning his blind face towards some sound or scent Gareth couldn't detect. Eventually, they came upon a small grove of oak trees. Nestled there, half hidden by branches and moss, was a simple wooden bench. Time had worn it down, but Gareth could make out his brother's initials carved into the seat, A.L. Beside it were the letters S.L. Solomon Langford. He realized with a jolt. Perhaps Alan had ceremonially taken ownership of the horse by carving their initials here, forging an unbreakable bond in this secret, tranquil spot. Gareth sat on the bench, letting Solomon graze around him. The afternoon sun cast warm rays through the leaves. In that hushed ambience, Gareth felt a deep peace. It was as if Alan's spirit lingered there, the echoes of his love woven into the rustle of the oak trees. Gareth realized that continuing the therapy program was not just about fulfilling a legacy. If Solomon hesitated at an unfamiliar sound, Gareth would gently encourage him, stepping forward so the horse could follow. In that give and take, a profound trust blossomed. Visitors to the therapy sessions noticed this remarkable bond. They marveled at the way Solomon seemed to sense Gareth's presence, as if by telepathy. Sometimes Gareth had the distinct feeling that Solomon saw him better than any sighted horse ever could, piercing beyond the surface to the heart of who he was. And it was in that synergy that the final piece of Gareth's transformation crystallized. He'd begun this journey as a man returning out of guilt, saddled with regret. Now, he stood on the threshold of a future rich with purpose, gentleness, and growth. The stable was thriving. A formal program was emerging with help from HopeRise stables and local donors. Individuals still arrived, seeking respite from pain or trauma, and left with renewed hope in their hearts. One day, a local official visited to discuss the possibility of awarding Gareth's stable a community service grant. As they toured the barn, the official paused, watching Solomon interact with a new group of therapy participants. The official turned to Gareth, smiling. "A blind horse leading us all," he said in wonder. "Who would have thought such a thing possible?" Gareth's chest tightened with gratitude. "We're all in the dark sometimes," he replied softly. "It helps to have someone or something to guide us." And that was the secret no one had initially seen coming. That a horse without sight could illuminate paths in the human heart that had long been hidden. By stepping up to care for Solomon, Gareth discovered a reason to remain, to nurture, and to believe again. In the gentle glow of twilight, when the last visitor had left for the day, Gareth would stand beside Solomon in the paddock. The horse would lift his head to catch the fading light with those milky eyes, ears flicking as if listening for the quiet hum of the universe. Gareth always whispered a silent thank you to Alan, to Solomon, and to the intangible grace that had led him to this unbelievable discovery. Because in guiding a blind horse, Gareth finally learned to see. Thank you for joining me on this extraordinary journey into the heart of resilience, love, and second chances. Gareth's transformation and Solomon's guiding spirit show us that the darkest challenges can become beacons of hope if we only open our hearts. Stories like theirs remind us that no loss is final, no hurdle insurmountable, and that every living being deserves compassion, faith, and understanding. If this tale touched you or made you reflect on your own life in a deeper way, please consider supporting this channel. Hit that like button. Share this story with friends who might need a dose of inspiration. And don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming journeys and uplifting discoveries. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive and helps spread their healing message far and wide. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay brave, and cherish the bonds that guide us all.